Before he leaves the floor, I just want to thank the chairman of the Finance Committee. I think the chairman said, well, the ranking member might agree with some of my comments. I agree with every one of the chairman's comments. And I think, Madam Chair, how I would begin, I think the chair would agree on it, is we can have some pretty spirited debates about health care in this chamber, in the Finance Committee. But as the chairman indicated, there wasn't an inch of difference with respect to our views on Robert Pear. We all thought he was a true professional, and he was the gold standard of journalism as it relates to health care. And I thought about yesterday, Chairman Grassley, because we had a hearing on a topic relating to reimbursement of physicians. And I think the chairman and I, again, would be of like mind. It probably wouldn't be inherently fascinating in every coffee shop in Iowa and Oregon, but it's incredibly important, for example, to the survival of rural hospitals and so many concerns that I know the President of the Senate has and distinguished chairman of the Finance Committee has. And I looked over at the press table, Chairman Grassley, and that seat for Robert Pear was missing. And Robert Pear, and it was what this special man was all about, he never jumped to sit in front and say, well, I'm from the New York Times, so I should count more. As the chairman remembers, he always sat in the back. And I thought, as we missed him so much yesterday, because the chairman and I had just gotten the news, that what we were talking about yesterday was what Robert Pear was all about. Taking a really complicated issue, probably not inherently fascinating, and putting it in really simple, understandable, thoughtful words for the American people. And as the chairman correctly said, that was what everybody would wait for when there was a complicated issue. You'd hear it among Republicans, the chairman's staff, my staff. People would hear about an issue, and very often the first thing they would say, did Robert Pear write about it? And if Robert Pear wrote about it, it was important. And in fact, one of the most noteworthy aspects of the incredible outpouring of affection and admiration for Robert Pear yesterday, and the chairman and I talked about it in the committee, is the New York Times had a slug called Pear on Health. And all over the country, my guess is the Des Moines Register, I know the Oregonian, my paper, big paper in Oregon, they'd all wait for the Robert Pear slug because they knew that was a really important issue. And the fact that Robert Pear wasn't at the witness table yesterday after all these years, it broke our hearts, brought back a lot of memories. I actually was stunned over the years. The chairman touched on it as an encyclopedic knowledge of health care. He remembered the amendment to the amendment to the amendment to the amendment that somebody would have offered 10, 15 years ago. When I came to the Congress, he went and studied the history of the Gray Panthers I was co-director of the senior citizens group. My little one still wonders if they're the Pink Panthers. Robert Pear knew everything about that. And when he was up on the hill, and the chairman probably remembers it, he had a little notebook which he kind of scribbled Chairman Grassley's remarks on, mine, or whoever he was talking to. But he also had bigger notebooks, and he kept this exhaustive set of files. And in a town where, particularly at important kind of post-hearing or post-legislation events, all the reporters were shouting one above another. Robert Pear was the most soft-spoken voice in the room. And in fact, I was at some events, my guess is the chairman was as well, when it got kind of loud and frantic and they're throwing microphones and the like at you. When Robert Pear raised his hand and was called on, the room hushed. It went quiet because everybody understood that the question Robert Pear would ask was the right one. And Senator Grassley and I were talking yesterday about how we particularly appreciated and felt that Republicans and Democrats would, that Robert Pear was fair to all sides, and he held us all accountable. The general sense was that if you were a legislator and you were going to be interviewed by Robert Pear, you better go out and do some serious prep work, because he would know the subject inside out, and in that soft-spoken way would just stay at it until he excavated the real facts. But that was part of the Pear tell the right story in the right way approach to ensure that if you read a Robert Pear health story, you learned something. Now, I think most senators would agree that is not always the case with every single story, but that was the standard that Robert Pear set. And I think what I'd like to say is there are going to be a number of senators who, over the years, had a chance to work with Robert Pear, and you're going to hear their own accounts of their relationship. But, Madam President, you're not going to hear one single senator, not one, say that Robert Pear tried to make him look bad, took a cheap shot, tried to say something flashy in order to get a headline. They're going to say just the opposite. They're going to say that's what journalism is supposed to be all about. I'm a journalist kid, very proud of it. My dad, a first-generation Jewish kid, taught himself English, was a journalist. And he always said, Ron, the journalists, their job is to ask the tough questions that really matter. And Robert Pear asked the tough questions, no doubt about that. But he always did it in a very unique way, a fair way, a thoughtful way, a way that embodied the gold standard for journalism that I have described. So yesterday was particularly sad. We got the news in the morning. We had that health care hearing start about an hour after we got the news. And the first thing I thought of as I came into the room is how hard it's going to be, and it's not going to stop hurting for a long time. To imagine that seat at the end of the press table, not having the thoughtful, informed Robert Pear sitting there so he could get the facts to the American people. So I just want to close today. We've had a number of colleagues speak already to say, Robert Pear, you are the consummate professional. You were fair to the bone. It was an honor to get to work with you over the years in healthcare. We say goodbye to someone who was a true mensch. And this afternoon, with heavy hearts, we think of Robert Pear, and want the country to know what an extraordinary person he was.